Right. Well, the Florida Gators completed their second scrimmage of the year, and we've got a little bit of insight from it and a bit of a reaction to Napier's press conference afterward. We're going to jump right into it. We've invited Abolverdi. Did I say that right?
Not quite, but you got the you got
Abolverdi,
the
right?
start of that last initial right. There we go.
Abolverdi.
There
I
you go.
know how to
Hey.
say it, but here we are from Gators Online to chat through not only the scrimmage, but what he's seeing just kind of in the spring in general. Zach, thanks so much for joining me. Sorry for butchering your last name, even though I really do know how to say it.
It's
Um,
all right. It's all right. It's all good.
I thankfully have a very simple last name that nobody butchers, but I tried. I'm sorry. So let's talk right about spring. What are your overall impressions of spring this year compared to last year?
Yeah, obviously, still a lot of newness, but not as much newness. I mean, they have a ton of new players that they've added to the roster, 27 total, which is a lot to
Yeah.
have in a spring, especially 17, high school early enrollees. Like that, I've never seen a number that high. So that's new in that sense, but it's also there's still not as much newness in terms of like where the program is at, where the coaching staff is at in terms of installing their schemes, and that's even with a new defensive coordinator because he's Austin Armstrong is bringing over a lot of what Patrick Toney ran this past season. So the terminology is the same. They still have a lot of kind of their core returners back, and I think that they're just, as Napier has said multiple times, they're farther along as a team and as a program than they were this time last spring.
All right. So this is the first time we've gone live on this channel. So if people want to super chat, we'll get every single one of those questions in. We will try and answer as many of the other ones as we possibly can as well. So definitely fire them over. And we won't hold this till the end. We want to know everybody. We know everybody wants to know about the quarterbacks. I was told that Mertz didn't have the best scrimmage tonight. Sounds like Jack and Max were a little bit better today, but I understand that things can really be up and down kind of from day to day for guys, especially when they're new, especially in the spring. What are your thoughts on the quarterback battle so far this spring?
Yeah, obviously, this has been a Mertz and Miller competition for the most part. I mean, I think Max Brown, although he's shown flashes throughout camp and he did so once again in the second scrimmage, he's still a guy that's learning how to play the position. So he's not in a position to contend for the job. And I think coming into camp, most people, including me, viewed Miller as the favorite to win, but I don't think that he was going to necessarily lock up the job in the
Sure.
spring. I think that there was a chance that he could have established himself as the clear cut favorite, which I don't think that he's necessarily done.
Mhm.
So I think that this thing is going to carry into fall training camp. I think that it is a credit to Jack Miller for not only the way that he's progressed, but also the way that he's responded to the competition.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, because he basically was set up to be the starter with Anthony Richardson moving on, and then they go out and add Graham Mertz, and that just kind of throws a wrench into his plan. So he's, according to Billy, responded the right way. And even though he's doesn't have the starting experience that Graham has, there are some advantages that he does have in terms of just being in this program, knowing the offense a little bit more than Graham does. So I think that has made this a little bit more of a closer competition than people expected. And based on, you're right. I mean, based on the way the second scrimmage went, it's still a back and forth battle.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is something we'll see go on for, well past spring, into fall camp. But I don't, I don't think the competition's a bad thing, though, right? I mean, this has got to iron sharpens iron, right?
Yeah, and this is a real competition. Like last year, they
Yeah,
didn't have it wasn't a competition between Anthony and Jack as much as Anthony still had to go out and earn the job in the spring.
sure.
By the time that it was over, both everyone knew that this was AR's team. Now, Billy was asked tonight, would you like to come out of spring with one guy
Mhm.
as the clear cut starter so that there's someone for the team to rally around? And he just didn't seem to think that that was much of a big deal, really, until the games get close. So he's like, "Hey, they're rallying around both guys. They're comfortable with both guys. At the end of the day, you're still talking about two former Big Ten quarterbacks coming from prominent programs.
Yeah.
One guy's a 3-year starter, and the other guy is only a backup or has been a backup because the last two guys that he played behind were C.J. Stroud and Anthony Richardson, who could
Right.
be the first two quarterbacks off the board. So
Sure.
I wouldn't hold that against Jack Miller that he's been a backup at his last 2 years. So I'm anxious to see what he can do in this spring game, and obviously I know folks want to see Graham as well.
So I heard the team ran a little bit of wildcat today with both running backs. Can you speak to the athleticism that we've got going on offense? Because I mean, there's some real talent there, even playing other positions than the one that they're slated for.
Yeah, I know that I want to say there was a couple times where they ran Wildcat in Napier's first season, but we did not see it a lot. I think that now, if you're looking on the offensive side of the ball, everyone would pretty much say that those two running backs are the strength of that unit. And I think being able to use some Wildcat makes a lot of sense to utilize those guys' strengths. So those two, from everything that we heard, both had really good scrimmages on Thursday night. Both had really long runs. And Trevor, especially, there was another run that he had, a long run that he had out of this past week that made its way on the social media
Mhm.
that they mashed up and was kind of a lot like the run that he had against South Carolina. The only
Yeah.
difference was Trevor looks way faster right now than he did as a freshman. So I think it makes a lot of sense that you're going to try and get those guys with the ball in their hands as much as possible. And Wildcat is a great way to do that. That's something that Napier used at Louisiana, and it seems like it's a feature that we might see this year too.
UF weapons are all the rave this spring. I heard really good things about Caleb Douglas from tonight's scrimmage. Apparently, he had a big catch over Hakeem Jackson. Can you talk about what you've seen from him specifically so far this spring?
Yeah, he's a guy that's certainly more involved in the rotation and working a little bit more, with Mertz and Miller than I think where he was last year as a freshman. He kind of got that opportunity when there were some injuries at that spot. So now he's in more of a position to contend for playing time, and I think that he's done that. He's a guy that had a big play in the last scrimmage as well. And then another guy that had a strong day today at the receiver spot was Xavier Henderson. I mean, Billy Napier just raved about the guy in his performance in the second scrimmage and basically was saying every time he looked up, that guy was making a play. So, I mean, Ricky Pearsall, deservedly so, gets a lot of the attention and hype at that position. But right on the other side is Xavier Henderson, who's another veteran starting receiver, has been with the program even longer than Ricky. And I think the two of those guys mixing with some of the young guns like Caleb Douglas, it's given them a pretty good wide receiver corps.
All right, so this channel is up to 2,200 subscribers in a little over a month. We have a big goal of 3,000 by the spring game. If you're watching this live or on replay, do me a favor and hit the subscribe button. We'll do more lives if this does well, and you guys can show me that you like that by subscribing. We can't do a video without talking about Andy Jean, who Coach Napier mentioned tonight in the post-game scrimmage press conference. But we really get a lot of questions also about Aiden Mizell. Do you think he can get in and make an impact for UF this year?
Yeah, I think he's going to have a chance to certainly play on special teams and then get an opportunity to get out there on a go route. I mean, he's the fastest guy on the team,
Yeah.
Mizell is. So I just, even though he's also one of the smallest guys on the team,
Right.
probably weight wise. So I think he's obviously still got more to add there, but you got to find some way as a gunner or something to get that guy on the field. I think Andy is a little bit more polished, a little bit more in SEC shape to be able to get on the field as a true freshman. Now, granted, I think it's important to note that both of those guys, for the most part, have been working with the third team. So I don't know how early that we will see them, but I do think that Andy will probably be more in line to play more at that receiver spot. But I just, I mean, we saw the big touchdown that Mizell had in the first scrimmage, and that was him utilizing that speed and getting behind the secondary. That's something that he will be able to do right away, even if he's not the way that they want or doesn't know all the playbook yet. And then don't forget, you got Trey Wilson coming in too as the 5-star wide receiver from Tampa. So he's going to come in and make some noise as well. And I think that all three of those guys, I think, are upgrading that receiver position.
It needed an upgrade. Was told that the offensive line looked really good. Like they really are starting to gel really well. Billy Napier also raved about them in his press conference as well. When you compare it to last year's unit, do you think this offensive line can be even better in 2023?
That's hard to say. I think that there was a chance that they could not have a drop off with Mazuka, and I think that his injury is obviously a setback. I'm fascinated to see what they do just to get their best five on the field, whether that's Jalen Farmer becomes a part of that mix, who's a guy that's basically been out for all of spring and is supposed to come back. I don't think he didn't play tonight. Cam Waits is another guy. If whenever he comes back from his Achilles injury, could he step right in? Because he started the bowl game. Don't forget. And then, also you've also got some of the young guns like Najee Harris and some of these other guys that have been getting some reps. So I like the pieces that they added. I like the depth that's there. I just think that they're going to have to figure out a way to get their best starting five on the field because of the injury to Mazuka. I would not even be surprised to see them experiment with Damian George at guard and having Goodwin as the right tackle, just as a way to try and get your best five on the field, and maybe Leonard slides over to play left guard. So there's a lot of different combinations that they can work with. Billy did admit that they were a little bit down guys in the scrimmage, and the defensive line took advantage of that in some situations. But I think, like I said, when Jalen Farmer's back, when Cam Waits is back, and then certainly when Micah Mazuka's back, I think they will have a chance to potentially be as good, maybe even better. But it's still hard to say right now because of kind of the injuries not allowing those guys to get that time I think that they needed in the spring.
We've heard from people that have been at practice multiple times that they really are impressed with the depth of the offensive line. Obviously, injuries notwithstanding. Yep. So if all of those guys are healthy, that there's actually a lot more that could make it in the rotation than last year, which, obviously having that depth is helpful, even if maybe the individual players by themselves don't have the same kind of accolades that we had last season.
Yeah, and it's nice, too, because usually when you lose 4 of your 5 starters on the offensive line in the past, it was going to be a rebuild. And, you knew that you were going to have a drop-off because you're going to have probably some redshirt freshmen or sophomores, that guys that have been waiting in the wings. Florida's not in that position now. Even with the injury to Mazuka, you add those 2 SEC transfers that are now competing for that right tackle spot, and George and Goodwin. Like I said, George could also play guard as well. That's allowed Florida to be in a spot where they could not have a drop-off. And that's hard to say when you lose a guy like Cyrus Torrence and, an all-SEC lineman and Ethan White. But Florida's in a good spot because of how they've recruited in the portal and in high school ranks as well.
All right, I'm going to put you on the spot here. I've heard mixed things about the defensive line. Some good, some areas of improvement. I have heard that size is a question outside of Watson, though. Napier praised the unit's length and was really high on them in the presser. What have you seen this spring from that unit?
Cam Jackson. I think Cam Jackson's going to be a dude. He's definitely somebody that I've heard from multiple people that maybe one of the most impactful transfers I think that they added from this transfer class. You lost Jervon Dexter, obviously, which was a huge departure. So to be able to plug a guy in there, I think has been a good addition. Now, there is obviously still them trying to develop some depth there, and I think that they've experimented with obviously moving Uman Milan to edge, and now I think it's really Boone's job there at defensive end. And there's also the setup, too, is different. Now you got Mike Peterson not just as the outside linebackers coach, but he's working with the ends as well. So the structure of the defensive line is a little bit different. But you're right. I mean, I think they are going to, maybe lose or give away some of that size that was maybe there last year, but also make up for it with some better athleticism, with some more length. And you would hope at the very least, more depth, because you don't want to have your starters at defensive tackle and nose tackle playing, 50 snaps a game, and that's kind of where Dexter was at. I don't think that they'll be in that spot this year.
I think fans are going to like to hear that. All right, this is a reminder to everybody to do me a favor, like the video if you haven't already, submit questions below, and we'll chat with Zach a little bit on them, as well as answer a few after we wrap up with him. And we are going to answer all the super chats. We have a question, Zach, for you here on linebackers and safeties, specifically Dijon Johnson at Star. Even though he's not out there yet, let's talk about the middle and back end of the defense. Do you have any thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, two really, I think, important updates for the scrimmage was that they got Taraja Mitchell and Miguel Mitchell, both Mitchells, out of non-contact jerseys and out there to scrimmage. I think that was big. Taraja Mitchell's probably going to start at inside linebacker next to Shamar James. So to have him now be able to go through a scrimmage, he missed the first one. He's still a guy coming over from Ohio State who's played a lot of football, but he still needed to get in the spring and I think play with this unit. So it was big for him to be back there. I think Miguel Mitchell is for sure going to be one of your starting safeties this year. Having him back after, I think he just missed this past week. But I still think that they could use another safety. I think Kamari Wilson is probably most likely to start. Mm-hmm. But Napier said it tonight. I mean, they need more depth there. They need more experience there. They're going to have to rely on some young guys, which is great opportunities for them. But you also don't want to have necessarily a true freshman be your backup safety. So that's a spot they got to address. And I think Star is still up for grabs. I mean, there was, the plan to move Jaden Hill there. I think that he will continue to get reps there, but I don't know necessarily that that's a for sure thing or that he's locked down that spot. So Perkins is another guy that's playing a lot of Star, but Dijon Johnson, I mean, it would have been great for him to be an early enrollee because I think that was the plan at one point. Yeah. But hey, if he can walk in and just show out in camp, I mean, it's not like that job is locked down by any means. So we'll see what he can do.
Sorry, so we got a question that said, please ask your husband to work with the special teams unit. I was going to ask you about special teams. I think that was an area that UF really kind of struggled last year, and I do think if their special teams units would have been elite, Florida probably won a couple more games. What have you seen from practice this year? Do you think it's been a focus? Is it something we're improving on?
Yeah, it's hard for me to say because when we are in there, we don't. Not only do we not see much special teams, but obviously we only get 15 minutes. So to be completely honest, that isn't the area that we watch. Plus, there isn't much of a bat or question mark there with the specialist. Now it will be interesting to see what they decide to do, with the returners. Is it Xavier Henderson again as the punt returner? Do they give a guy like Ricky Pearsall a shot? And I think Trevor Etienne, it will be your kick returner, and he's got a chance to do some special things back there. So, but I know for Florida fans that, have certainly in the last two national championships that they won, a big part of that was the special teams play. So if they can get back to blocking kicks and doing some of those other things that they did during the heyday, that will make a difference. It's been missing. They did get a block kick in the bowl game, so maybe that's a trend that they can build on.
I'm sure you remember this from back in those days, but Urban Meyer used to tell them block a punt, win the game. The stats were like 94% of games where there's a blocked punt, that team wins.
Wow.
And I mean, it's a insane stat. You'll have to look it up, but it is true. And I would love to see Florida be a little bit more aggressive there because I do think that's what you need to win in this conference, especially if you don't have, an offense that's going to put up 60 points, which, I don't know how many we're going to put up a game, but that would be hard to believe, for me. So hopefully they'll put a little bit more, emphasis on special teams. And I honestly would love to see a special teams coach personally. I know that they kind of spread the responsibilities around and they have, their game-changing coordinators or, whatever their fancy titles are. But I wouldn't hate if there was somebody whose job was just to coach special teams.
Yeah, and they have changed the structure a little bit. in terms of how they divvy up the responsibilities. So there isn't just one person to blame, I guess, when things go wrong. Um, so we'll see. I think that Billy would be the first person to admit that they got to get better there, and I think that's the reason why he made some of the changes.
Yeah. All right. Another topic in the chat was where UF might try to look in the portal. It is going to be opening up as soon as spring is over. We mentioned a bunch of positions where we are thin or might need a little bit of help. Who do you think they target, or what position do you think they target?
Yeah, safety for sure. That would be number one, I think, for me. And quarterback, I think that they'll look to add a four scholarship quarterback. Even if the 2025 quarterback that they just got reclassifies and joins the team in 23, which would be crazy,
Yeah.
he wouldn't be ready to play, or they wouldn't be able to count on him.
Right.
So I still think that they would go after somebody and then have five, which that'd be something that they've had before. So quarterback is a spot. I think at the edge position is another place where they could use another player. I would have never even thought offensive line going into the spring, and I don't necessarily think it's a need unless they think that Mizuka will not be back by the start of the season.
Right.
If there's just like some stud that shows up in the portal that you just can't say no to because he could come in and play right away, I wouldn't rule out them adding another offensive lineman simply for the fact that of the injuries. Now, if
Yeah.
Waits hadn't gotten hurt and Mizuka hadn't gotten hurt and Farmer hadn't been hurt, I don't think that they'd be in that situation where they would even consider it. So those are the spots that stick out to me.
All right, we've asked a lot of people their thoughts on the spring game being on a Thursday. Napier mentioned it, that it was about avoiding Easter and the fact that there were 9 other games that Saturday. What are your thoughts on it being a week from tonight?
Yeah. I mean, as a media member, it really doesn't make a difference to me. So I'll say that to start. I get I get the motivation behind doing it. It is, I think, more recruiting based than anything.
Sure.
I mean, maybe there is something to be said about attendance not being as high if you do it Easter weekend. I was gonna say, I mean, like if there was a week that maybe they could do it on a Friday,
Yeah.
instead of a Thursday, I think that would make more sense.
Yeah.
Just because then people can stay and it's not a weekday the next day.
I mean, it was the
But
Thursday before Easter last year, and you
it
saw
was.
they didn't have a problem with attendance there.
Yeah, so, but again, like I mentioned, this is a recruiting ploy. I think more than anything, it works because now you're not having to compete with all these other schools that are having spring games on a Saturday. So I get it. It is inconvenient, I think, for people that want to travel from around the state and have to work on a Friday. But hopefully we won't see a lot of Thursday games in season.
Yes, hopefully we'll not have many there. One and done this upcoming season anyway.
Yeah.
Zach, thanks so much for joining me. I really appreciate your time. I know you're very busy during spring, so it means a lot that you are willing to come on with me and tell the people where they can follow you and find your work.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. You guys can follow me on Twitter at Zach Abolverdi, and you guys can read all my work at GatorsOnline.com, along with Nick Del Torre. Corey Bender is always on top of the recruiting news, and it's a busy time, especially with the spring game coming up next week, so make sure you guys check out all the coverage there.
All right. Well, we appreciate you. Have a great night.
Thanks, you guys.
All right, guys, I appreciate you all a ton for hanging out this evening. This was our first live. We want to do more of these, so make sure that you share this, hit the subscribe button, and let's get the word out there. We're going to keep the content pumping out between now and the spring game. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for what's next, and go Gators.